Yep, it's time for a new channel. You're going to get a lot of MMO content on here, even sorts of things we've never done before. But enough of that, it is Final Fantasy XIV time. Because it looks like Matt got Asmongold and myself both. I've kind of dallied about for sure, but now it's time. This is my Final Fantasy XIV experience. FF14's introductory experience is okay. I can see why some people bump off it, but it's not a problem for most of us because we end up coming to FF14 with the wind of our friends' recommendations at our backs. So where for some, eyes could gloss over at lots of text, well, for me they didn't, right? Most of us paid attention because we would know that it would build somewhere. And even before my first steps into Heavensward, I can tell you that, yeah, it does indeed build. The combat is slow at the start, the stakes are smaller, but there's detail there to appreciate. There's a world to soak in. Take The Expanse as an example. I love the TV show. It's got a lot of dense world building during its first season, but by the end of season 1, well, its pace hits. The pieces come together, and then it hits its stride. And from what I can tell, FF14 is kind of like that. You do have to put in that extra work and that extra attention to the details early on, but if you do, you're rewarded. This is the anti-spam quest text game. So if you're willing to meet it at that pace, then your chances of having a good time, I think, are pretty damn high. Now for me, the initial MSQ and Archer job quests were, while not thrilling, certainly compelling enough. You know, there was constant hints of there being something far greater, all of those Heidelin teases. It's like, interesting. So, all of that had me pretty excited when I was, level 12, 13, 14. So how did things go when the game really started to branch out? Okay, it's time to talk about the narrative of FF14. You leave your starting experience with the reinforcement of the Garlean Empire as a looming threat, and compared to the quite a bit more peaceful forests of Britannia where I started, well, they did seem like a foe worth fearing. Of course, knowing of FF14 legacy and what's covered in the opening cinematic, you'll kind of understand a little bit more there, and you'll be kind of excited to see these big cheesy villains. Now from here, the main narrative flips between dealing with the emerging primal threat and then the Guardian Empire. Of course, I'm going to save the details and not do spoilers, but suffice to say, during this, the gang comes together, right? Square Enix successfully nail that sense of threat, and they do a real good job of taking you around Eorzea, slowly building up that world, making those city-states feel like places. And there's good and there's bad here. The pacing really does dip, and some bits are a bit of a slog. Take that Costa del Sol segment. You probably know it if you've played the game. It's just okay, it can be a bit jarring. It's one of those bits your friends tell you about, the filters of ARR as the community calls them. But in the ARR patch content, I actually went back to one of those Costa del Sol characters. I met them again, and it felt great, because the growth that my character had experienced was totally recognized in a few neat lines of dialogue from that NPC. It made the world feel a bit more real. And while I'm sure many of these pacing problems could be fixed up in a rework, I also get why it is this way. For me, what mattered was the payoff, and I did get that. I actually felt I understood how this world came together, how I fit in this world. But really, it wasn't until the Garuda cutscene that it all clicked. A bit like that moment at The Expanse again, where the crew of the Rossi and Miller finally meet up in Season 1, where the plot points converge, the pace quickens, and bam, you are in for that great stretch of narrative. Now, is the voice acting great? Gods no. Please, I never want to hear a word of pre-Heavensward Minfilia again. Is the voice acting consistently used? No, it is not an ARR. But does it somehow still manage to be more than the sum of its parts? Yeah, it does, and some of the characters I do like well enough. Does it do all of this while setting up enough of the world to have you interested in what will happen next? Yes. When the Ul'dah refugee crisis began in the ARR patch MSQ, I was pretty engaged and interested. What they really nail, though, is you, because you are the chosen one. And it's pretty damn clear from the start, unlike in World of Warcraft, where you sort of assume the role of the Chosen One on a per-expansion basis, with seemingly very little character continuity between them, and just main characters who kind of forget who you are. It's weird. But in FF, it's a role you grow into, and as you do, the world recognizes you. And I could talk about this in an MMO context all day, but You feel, very fucking unsurprisingly when you think about the game's title, you feel like a core character in a JRPG. It's almost as if this is in fact a Final Fantasy game. While ARR does not best the single-player entries in the franchise, people tell me Shadowbringers does, and I can totally see it going that way. Now, story-wise, much is told through cutscenes and dialogue. Dialogue is where you are talked to directly. Your character reacts to NPCs. So gone is this sort of feeling I've taken for granted in MMOs. NPCs talking at me. And the dialogue itself is usually great. NPCs speak colloquially. Jack or Jackie and his crew of rogues, they're great. They talk like rogues, they swear, slur, and swagger their way through life in Limsa, and they're just a great bunch. Not at all like the ninja I'd go on to meet, or some of the proper stuck-up elves, Elzen even. And then the Lalavels, they may be these wee folk, but they're not written that way, that's for sure, and they're quite fun. So really, what else is there to say here? Like, your character actually feels like a character that knows the other characters, and you're going through a journey together. It's all believable in the world, it's immersive. Now, to be fair, you can certainly tell that the realm was reborn while the developers were working on putting Legacy to bed. But even with that, it is more than the sum of its parts. That's the important bit. Just be ready for some rocky pacing, some boring bits, and for setup and world building, that'll only really pay off later. From a content perspective, ARR questing is very, very, very simple. It mostly boils down to killing a few NPCs, collecting a few items, and really often feeling like a visual novel with iffy pacing told through fetch quests. And this is absolutely the roughest part of the game, from what I could tell, and from what everyone's told me. Now, there is a bit of a saving grace. Duties. The solo duties are kind of like the miniature narrative scenarios that WoW has, and they just focus on portraying a scene. And this is where you can tell the devs get a bit more creative and the production values go up. So moments like breaking into an enemy base with Sid, or fighting a spoiler at the end of the Ninja campaign, those are all told through these duties, these sort of story duties. There's, I think, just something to be said about, having a solid in-game cutscene and some really good dialogue, and then going into some pretty good scripted gameplay. And also, you can sometimes die in those if you turn your brain off and spam about. So overall, it's great. Content is simple for the most part. Do not expect mind-blowing questing from the beginning. Take it as going through a fun VN with occasionally fun gameplay segments, all while you're exploring a cool world and getting to know its characters. This apparently does get much, much better in the expansions though, so I'm dead excited for that. Leveling then, how does that feel? Well, I'd say pretty good. Narrative, pacing issues aside, it is all rather smooth. You just follow the MSQ, and you keep up with your job quests. You then have fates in the world. Fates are a bit like world quests in World of Warcraft, but the key thing is the progress is shared and they happen in the world. So they spawn in and out in this player-driven way. And it all feels very cooperative, right? A bunch of you meet up together, defeat the enemies, complete the fate together. I think Guild Wars 2 does a lot similar, and it just made me realize how much Blizzard needs to catch up on the world content front. And there's the hunting log, I thought it was neat. Rather than giving you loads of reasons to just randomly kill mobs, the hunting log is basically just a kill list for each job within a level bracket. Kill a few of each mob, and you'll get a chunk of XP. And the effect of this is that rather than it feeling like a boring kill quest, you're just going from place to place doing the MSQ, but you might have a little deviation from your path to kill a mob and get some extra XP. So rather than random mob kill quests feeling like a gate to the story, they feel like a reward for paying a little bit more attention to your surroundings when you're going around the world. And I thought that was quite cool. Quite a bit more positive, though that system does evolve into something different in the expansions, I believe. Then there's alt job leveling. It's really well supported in the game, actually. Your alt jobs will actually enjoy an XP boost if they're way below your main job. So just milling around the world doing fates while you're, of course, queuing for roulettes, which is just the leveling via dungeons, do your daily roulettes thing. That meant that my level 32 transition from Bard to Rogue and then up to Ninja felt really smooth. And plus, it meant that I had another narrative to play, and the Rogue narrative is great. Lulls in pacing, such as the pre-Garuda segment, certainly detracted from my experience, but for the most part, yeah, I was a happy camper. Gameplay then. It starts so slow. They've really designed this game to be accessible to people who do not play MMOs. That said, job complexity absolutely does grow over time. Hello Ninja. But it is a bit dull at the start. The 2.5 second GCD and a sort of slow doling out of abilities can feel rough. Mobs in ARR aren't that interesting either, and most of the initial dungeons are, while nicely themed, not really super engaging as dungeons. Now where things get better is the primals that you fight. Those give you a taste of scale, and some of the later duties as well in the late ARR MSQ and ARR patch MSQ are pretty good. So from what I understand, really ARR is by far the worst bit in terms of gameplay, and it only goes up from there, with things especially like their encounter design language really evolving and becoming codified as they progress, I believe, through the Heavensward expansion. For what it's worth, the sheer scale of things like the primal fight from Into the Maelstrom, I mean, that was just cool. So overall, it's enough to do me, and from looking at my friends screen sharing their max level gameplay on Discord, I totally feel confident in where things are going. As for the visuals then, well, art direction's fantastic, armor design is fantastic with loads of options. It's very different to the likes of WoW stylistically, and that's a brilliant thing, just a bit more diversity there. While it does fall over a little bit in the technical side, like their anti-aliasing implementation kind of sucks. I mean, that I think can be helped with G-Shade and stuff. But yeah, it's that thing where there's a few technical aspects that can be jarring at the start, especially with how good like modern games look these days. But overall, that bit's fine. Good art direction is what's most important, and that really is what they do have. Also, a zone design thing. They feel open. They feel like real places, instead of tightly crafted, ultra-dense gameplay levels. And that's something I had found a bit frustrating in some of the modern World of Warcraft world content, and I kind of missed from its older days. So, that's all good too. A quick note then on player expression. I really can't say much about this because I've had such a limited perspective. But I will say this, my trips through Limsa often take far, far longer than they should because I'm, checking out people's armor, seeing what they're doing. Now, the glam system is not as slick to use as WoW's transmog system from a UI perspective, but the armor sets that are being glammed are really fantastic, and the game also has dyes, that's cool. The game's also just seemingly got such a wide variety of outfits and mounts, and they seem to be fine with letting something be a bit silly in the name of fun and player expression, which I like. And this just leaves its mounts and glams being cool. Just wait till I get stuck out into, kitting out my apartment, right? Or properly spending time at our FC house, which the guys have decked out completely. I mean, that will be fun. While not exactly my thing, I couldn't not mention G-Pose here. It's something I look at from the side, and I think it's cool. So between it and the potential of the glams, FF14, it's made things like fashion mags and sites like eorzeacollection.com exist. I mean, a guy in my free company is a nightclub bouncer in the game in his free time. John, on our team, has probably edited this video too. Hello, John. He's been spending some of his time making music on Bard. It's just cool even seeing bards just around the cities playing music. The game just feels very open and expressive, and I really like that. That stuff's not exactly my gameplay style, but being in a world where that's really strong, that's, I don't know, is it a positive aspiration? It's like even if you don't engage, the world is better for its existence, and you exist in that world. Patches then. I'm in the ARR patch MSQ at the minute, dealing with Ishgard, so it's totally setting up the Heavensward expansion. And it's exciting. Now what's been neat to see is the general increase in quality. It's almost as if, with these patches, they weren't rebuilding the game while also maintaining the legacy version. The newly cast voice actors, like for some of the Ishgardian characters, they're far, far better. There's also more voice acting. The plot lines feel more tight and focused, there's less padding, the new characters are great additions, and it just feels better. The pacing is better, the narratives are just better executed. So I can just tell that this is where the team is beginning to hit their stride. So I guess no wonder all of the memes that people have about Heavensward. Getting hints as well at more proper boss fights has been quite fun too in these quests. I mean, sure, they don't have their boss fight language like super well worked out, but I'm beginning to feel like what a more proper MMO boss fight is in FF, and honestly, a part of that too has been that it's just been refreshing to jump into a boss fight with no add-ons. And even hearing some WoW Mythic Raiders meme about banning weak auras after they've hopped into FF14, I mean, you can certainly understand that, can't you? Still, I'm in no position to compare the two games' raid content just yet, other than, look, I'm happy enough to do both, excited to do both even. So, to conclude, I'm in. I hope I'll be able to finish Shadowbringers by the time Endwalker comes out, but I mean, I sure as hell didn't rush through ARR, did I? I kind of refuse to treat this game like a job and push through it for content. So I'm going to keep going at my own pace. Certainly, I definitely want to play a lot more. I'm just enjoying it as I go. So hopefully I'll be there at cap, ready to jump into Endwalker with the rest of you. But even if I'm not, well, I am playing the content at my own pace, and I'm happy to. And that's one of the things people really love about FF14. It doesn't feel like it has that feeling of rush. And for the leveling and questing bit, WoW doesn't really either. I think the difference is that FF14's questing is telling one big, gripping story masterfully through multiple expansions, whereas WoW's is telling a series of partially related, super speedy, fast stories. WoW feels more like I'm playing a game. FF14 feels more like I'm engrossed in a story. So read into that as you may. Beyond that, I just have more faith in the development team. This is a final thing I have to acknowledge. They're better at communicating. They seem to get their player base more. Simply put, beyond playing a fun single-player story, I am beginning to feel just more confident investing my time into this MMO because I trust the track record of those making it. They don't seem to have a track record of dud expansions and big bungles and big problems and big dramas. And sure, I know that people do rate Stormblood as not being as good as Heavensward, but I'm pretty sure people still rate it pretty damn highly. And that is different from the constant back and forth of the WoW expansions where they mess up the game with systems, and then you try, everyone's, and then they're better by the end patch, and then the next expansion maybe has promise, and it just gets very tiring, and it doesn't seem like that goes on in this game. And I think that explains why a lot of WoW refugees are maybe moving out of their comfort zone and into Eorzea. Maybe they have a bit more faith in it. So there you go. That is my initial Final Fantasy XIV experience. It's been a blast. One of my main goals now is to carve out more time to actually just sit down, chill, relax, play the game, throw it on the big TV, get the big cinematic experience, enjoy the spectacle of the big fights. That's what I want to do. I hope you found this interesting. Let me know what this means for your own decision making with this game. Sorry for being so late, we really were. And I'll see you next time.